and we can see that these changed policies are also affecting on America's policies toward Afghanistan, because now they know that this is the right time to use this platform. I mean, like Pakistan, because Pakistan can play a favorable role for America. Otherwise, it would be too late. And this is the right time, because we know that the great time for America, because they know that after some time with this CPAC, the tier 3, after the completion of that, we know that it would be too difficult to persuade the other stakeholders. And you can also take it with another, you can use another lens, that is about Russia. We know that Russia's different organizations, security organizations, particularly this Collective Security Treaty Organization, is taking Afghanistan as an observer state. Similarly, Shanghai Cooperation Organization is now having its direct, its focus is more on Afghanistan peace.
Right.
So we can see that all these organizations, Russia, China, everyone is taking interest, and now the time is that who would be taking lead in this peace process. And that's why we can say that this is another reason to say that America is now speeding up this, it's trying to speed up this process. So these are three different points. There are so many other reasons which we can take, that why America is now utilizing this time. And the most important thing is, this COVID, because here I can take it again another important point,
right.
Because in this time period, in this COVID time period, we can see that different countries are now accelerating their pending projects. So this, to me, these are different, explanations. Yes, please.
Right, right. AVM Bhatti, do you think that Trump administration would let President Ghani to deal with the situation, because Trump administration is running out of time? Election year in the United States, and Trump administration has come a long way. They have invested a lot. Khalilzad visiting Afghanistan very often, having talks with the Taliban. That too was a big deal back even in the United States, and also interestingly going against the military establishment back in US. So do you think that US at the moment would let Ghani decide the fate of the intra-Afghan talks, or do you think that they would push President Ghani to go for the talks and start the intra-Afghan process?
Well, it will be very embarrassing for the Americans to let things slip away, because lately we have seen that they tried to make a move in the Security Council regarding arms embargo on Iran. That failed. That's a huge embarrassment for the Americans. Now here we are, that 29th of February they signed an agreement, and there was a date by which the intra-Afghan dialogue was to start, and it didn't happen, and it is still not happened. And America being a guarantor of implementation of this agreement. So it is a failure of the Americans if things are allowed to take their shape as they would. That means there is increased violence, and we also know that on daily basis there are scores of defection taking place from Afghan National Army, who are leaving their ranks and they're going and joining Taliban. So Ashraf Ghani is losing control, though slowly but surely, within Afghanistan, and Taliban are gaining ground. So if anything, Taliban can wait it out. But the fact is that the Americans have already started to cut back on aid. They have started to already giving signals to Ashraf Ghani to implement the agreement that they have signed. So I think while Ashraf Ghani may be waiting for the new American regime, hoping that they would reverse the entire process and they continue to stay, and Ashraf Ghani will continue to remain the president, I think there is little likelihood of that. But he is hoping against hope.
And Mr. Hassan, do you think that, as we know, President Trump is pretty straightforward? Do you think that he would run out of patience with the Afghan government, with President Ghani for that matter? Because they have been putting in a lot of effort in Afghanistan. And by the way, Ghani administration knows that they are supported by the US. They continue because they are supported by the US.
If you go through the tweets, the recent tweets of Ambassador Khalilzad, you would understand that they're running out of patience, or at least they are demonstrating that they're running out of patience, because there may still be a kind of diversity between what they're stating and what they actually want to happen. Yes, they've run out of patience, or they're running out of patience, that would be more correct to say. But what are the options that America has? They're not going to forcibly remove the regime in Kabul. Obviously, they're not going to do it.
Too late now.
So it's too late. And that possibly was never an option, because they are the creators of that regime. They are the creators of this kind of democracy, which is currently functioning in Afghanistan, whatever you may like to refer to it. Because if less than 10% people of a country participate in elections, which too in a dubious manner, I mean, you can't call them legitimate. And that is why President Ghani is there, as a consequence of that very dubious election that was conducted in Afghanistan. So his own legitimacy for the last 5 years, hung on a ruling of the Supreme Court. And now it basically virtually nobody accepts it, and that is why he was forced. President Ghani was forced to pass on these extra powers, this extra position to Dr. Abdullah to lead the charge, for commencement of inter-Afghan dialogue. And this is where the division has come about in Afghanistan. So I feel that even if President Ghani does not abide by the American instructions, regarding commencement of inter-Afghan dialogue, release of prisoners leading to commencement of inter-Afghan dialogue, I think there's little option that the Americans have. The use of force is not an option. So then President Ghani will succeed in delaying a decision to the holding of elections in America, and hoping that President Biden, if he wins the election, he comes in and changes America's stance regarding Afghanistan. That's a possibility. That's a possibility, but a very distant possibility. I don't think that is going to happen, no matter who comes, basically. And I don't believe in this theory that President Trump did it without the American establishment on board. I don't think American president would do that or can do it. No matter, depending on how you want to look at it, basically. So for me, the American establishment was on board. Maybe some people within the establishment, there's always a division.
James Mattis,
right. There may be division within the establishment. By and large, American establishment was on board with President Trump in taking this decision, because this war had gone on for 19 and a half years now.
It doesn't make any sense.
It was not leading to any success for the Americans, basically. So they were left with no option but to negotiate. So I think President Ghani will is again mistaken, that induction of President Biden as President of America will lead to a radical change in American policy vis-a-vis Afghanistan. So I think wisdom should prevail, and I think he should come to the table and commence the dialogue with release the prisoners, and maybe hold on to 5 or 6 people. I think the Taliban would agree to just 5 or 6 people, who these two countries, have said should not be released. He should go on and release the rest of them, and commence the dialogue with the Taliban. But that, as I said, is the path to his ouster as president of Afghanistan. So I feel, my personal understanding of President Ghani is that I think I would put my stakes against the commencement of dialogue, at least till the 3rd of November.
Right. Thank you for joining us. AVM Bhatti, thank you for your time. Thank you for joining us. Mr. Hassan, pleasure having on the show. Thank you for joining us.
Always a pleasure. Thank you.
Dr. Sirvat, thank you for joining us. Thank you for your time. That's all from today's show. See you next time. Khuda Hafiz.
What are the symptoms of coronavirus? The most common symptoms of COVID-19 are fever, dry cough and shortness of breath. These symptoms may not be sudden, rather begin gradually. Precaution, not panic.
Good evening, Assalamu alaikum. You're watching PTV World. I'm Fahim Bandish with the headline news for this hour. Afghan leaders must seize the historic opportunity to achieve an inclusive political settlement contributing to durable peace, security and prosperity in Afghanistan, says Prime Minister Imran Khan during his telephonic conversation with the Afghan leader Abdullah Abdullah. Prime Minister Imran Khan formed the National Coordination Committee on Tourism aimed at enhancing scope of tourism in the country. Prime Minister Imran Khan says the government has taken all possible steps to ensure transparency in subsidy system and making it more targeted and transparent. Massive relief operation involving teams of civil administration, Pakistan Army and Sindh Rangers is underway in Karachi as heavy rains wreak havoc in the city and all across Sindh province. Foreign Minister Qureshi says Pakistan-US partnership is essential for regional stability. Pakistan categorically rejects the so-called charge sheet by India's National Investigation Agency. Foreign Office in a statement states fabrications are designed to further BJP's anti-Pakistan rhetoric and its narrow domestic political interests. A violent flash flood kills over 70 people and destroys hundreds of homes just north of Afghan capital Kabul. That's all for now. Further details and live streaming, do log on to our website world.btv.com.bk. You can also find us on our Facebook page with the name of BTV World and follow us on Twitter at WorldBTV. Thank you for joining us.
Those who look for seashells will find seashells. Those who open them will find pearls.
How to protect and prevent from COVID-19. Regularly wash your hands with soap and water for about 20 seconds. Thoroughly clean your hands with an alcohol-based sanitizer. Maintain at least 1 meter, almost 3 feet of distance from anyone who's coughing or sneezing. Avoid touching your eyes, nose and mouth. Covering your mouth and nose with your bent elbow or a tissue when you cough or sneeze. Then dispose of the used tissue immediately. Stay home if you feel unwell. If you have a fever, cough and difficulty breathing, seek medical attention and call in advance. Follow the directions of your local health authority. Precaution, not panic.
Raise your words, not voice. It is rain that grows flowers, not thunder.
Hello and welcome to Politics Today. I'm Farrukh Pitafi. Viewers, if you remember, yesterday we actually talked about the government's economic agenda and how the government is trying to meet the needs or expectations of FATF, IMF and various other partners. Today again we are going to talk about the very same issue because there are many developments. For example, the bills regarding FATF that sailed through the National Assembly without much problem actually found out that they were stopped in the Senate. And when you talk about all these matters, you have to see what were the claims by the opposition when the opposition was opposing it. The opposition says that in these bills, the government has tried to slip in certain interesting, amendments or changes to the law where people can be apprehended without any legal document. This is quite interesting, but that is not all. On one side, there is this humongous battle where we have to actually fix the system and ensure that money laundering doesn't take place, that terror financing doesn't find any kind of space, that other such elements don't find any space of the sort. But on the other side, we have to then go on to FATF and convince them that we are doing enough. These are interesting developments. The Prime Minister of Pakistan was very critical of the opposition, which actually foiled these bills for now. We have to see what happens in coming days. We are going to talk about these matters and more. In order to help us understand these issues, we are joined by Mohammad Ibrahim Khan Sahab, MNA of Pakistan Tehreek-e-Insaf, the ruling party. Thank you very much, sir, for being part of the program. Next to him, to help us understand the legal and constitutional bottlenecks, we are joined by former Justice Shakhawat Sahab, who is a constitutional expert, a legal expert of renown. Thank you very much, sir, for being part of the program. Next to him is Amar Zafar Durrani Sahab, President of Re-Energia, and also a development economist. Thank you very much, sir, for being part of the program as well. Ibrahim Khan Sahab, I have to start with you. Let me ask you, why is it that you can't seem to hold consensus when it comes to passing laws regarding FATF and fixing the system?
I think we had a consensus and it was passed smoothly, other than few skirmishes here and there.
Yeah.
And those were
when you have skirmishes, it is not called smooth.
No, skirmishes weren't like regarding the law or regarding the bill, but it was, I mean, a few other issues, I mean, name calling and small little things here and there. And I think as far as the law is concerned, I mean, that was passed, I mean, very smoothly.
Okay. By the National Assembly?
By the National Assembly.
And now we are talking about Senate.
Yes, with the consensus of all parties, because before putting that, constitutionally putting it on the, on the table,
right.
Before tabling it, we had a consensus, and
right.
all parties like joined hands and did deliberations on how to go about it.
Right.
And the common sense prevailed.
Right, but now that when Sharif Rahman Sahiba from People's Party says that you slipped in certain, important amendments which actually imply that without any legal homework you can arrest anybody. You don't agree with this?
I think it's really a difficult one. The question is really a difficult one because I think if you look at the Western style of the governance and the laws,
right,
you're innocent until proven guilty.
Yeah.
Here it's the other way around.
Okay.
You are guilty until proven innocent.
Yeah, but wasn't...
So I think I personally feel it's better sense to prevail, and which is like you are innocent until proven guilty.
Okay. Interestingly, when Sharif Rahman Sahib actually made this comment, Prime Minister's advisor on accountability rebutted that, and he said that there was no, amendment of this sort. and he said that although they have brought in the business community and their accountability, it is important. Justice Shahawar, your take on the matter, do you think that this is purely point scoring, or there is any legal foundation to the claims of the opposition?
I believe that there was some lack of coordination or liaison between the treasury benches and the opposition. We have experienced in the recent past that the opposition did endorse the legislations which were the requirements set by the FATF, and unanimously the bills were carried out and the legislations were made. But in this particular case, when the two bills were presented, which were also assented by the National Assembly with majority, and these were transmitted to the Senate of Pakistan. There, because this is the reality that the joint opposition have more seats in the Senate, and they did not agree with it, and rather they declined. And now the matter will go to the joint session of the Parliament. But what I believe is that there must have been some homework by the treasury benches. And we have experienced that one thing which added to the heating up of the atmosphere was that when the opposition parliamentary parties, they demanded the leader of the House in the Senate that he should apologize for giving some harsh statements against the opposition leaders, which he refused, and that, I believe, more heated the atmosphere.
And essentially it is political point scoring.
I believe so, which should not have been done. But I believe is that there must be some balance from both sides. Because this is always in the benefit of the government and the treasury benches, that they must get past a bill which has already been passed by the National Assembly, and the responsibility lies on the leader of the House in the Parliament, in the Senate, and to some extent the advisor or the state minister for parliamentary affairs, because they should arrive a consensus before placing some matter before a House. And I believe that there was overdoing from both sides. The treasury benches should have shown some leniency, and I believe if the leader of the House and the Senate would have apologized, I believe it was very easy that a consensus could have been developed.
That's a good point, sir, but I mean, this is not native part of the argument, but due to respect, when we are talking about national interest, it seems that egos are bigger than national interest.
I believe because the matter is the demand of FATF. And on that issue, I believe the treasury benches and the opposition parties should have been on the same page.
Durrani sir, let me bring you in. Your take on the importance of what we are doing right now to fix the problems regarding FATF, and do you think that the journey so far, the kind of amendments that we have brought in, will satisfy FATF?
Well, thank you very much, Farrukh. So I think that the first thing we might need to be very cognizant of is the journey with FATF is going to be a long one. We've already had 3 extensions, and luckily because of COVID, we get another extension, and now, October 2020. I think before we get into whether we will be able to satisfy or not, we should also look at the structure of the FATF, because a very good friend, has written about this in Business Recorder, that Pakistan needed to have fought on 2 accounts, right? The first is to basically set its own house right, which Pakistan is trying, right? So currently, if I remember, it's about 13 out of the 27 points that we still need to take action on. These are very well defined and clear points. So I think that is an internal matter. However, where Pakistan has not done well is to actually, the second part is to go after the FATF itself. Right? Because the FATF has issues in terms of its political impartiality, and I think for the last 2 years, Pakistan has not fared well. Another thing which is going to impact point number 2 is the fact that actually there has been a change of presidency. I don't know if everyone has picked up on that, but 1st of July, we now have a German president. And the Chinese president has been, has stepped down. So I think in terms of whether Pakistan can actually do this, the answer is yes, we can. Because now, actually, to be very honest, for Pakistan, we have a war on two fronts. The internal front is politicized. However, all the things Pakistan currently has to do are actually in its own favor.
Right.
Whether you look at it from a border security standpoint, or whether you look at it from an internal, terror organizations, the internal sort of upheaval or lack thereof, in Pakistan.
Right.
So, yeah.
Yeah. These are important points, but regarding the political element that you were pointing out of FATF, it is a political body essentially, because there is voting involved, right? When you say that Pakistan should have gone after it, that means that Pakistan should have aggressively lobbied for it?
Well, okay, let me explain this. So actually, Pakistan should set a target, not to just meet FATF goals, but to become a member of the FATF,
Right.
which Pakistan is not. India is, Turkey is, Saudi Arabia is. So I think that if you set that goal for yourself, then your intentions will be questioned less. Because in other words, instead of trying to legitimize your existence, you will then be part of the party that is trying to legitimize other people's existence.
Any reason why we are not members?
Well, to be very honest, no. I think the Asia Pacific group, yes, India has a big part because that's the group we are part of. I think that there has been no consistent or cogent effort by the Foreign Office to actually work on this ground, neither the Foreign Office nor the Finance, but actually it's more, as you know, a Foreign Office issue.
That's a very interesting issue, and let me actually bring the question to you, Ibrahim Khan Sahab, because usually it is said that if you're not part of the solution, you're part of the problem. And if Pakistan is not part of these bodies, Pakistan will never be able to actually work for, enhancing its own interest and protecting its interest. Why is it that every time things come to this part, that we start realizing that perhaps we have to go and start lobbying for ourselves?
I really do agree with him, and very logical that you be a part of the system in order to pave your way and basically achieve your targets or...
in principle we are agreeing, but there must be some problem with the system itself.
There's nothing wrong with the system. We were so preoccupied in the internal issues of like our economic issues.
For 73 years, sir?
No, I'm answerable for the last 2 years.
Yeah, but you have known the system. I mean, we are Pakistanis after all.
I'm not 73 years old yet.
Yeah,
but anyways, yes, on the foreign front, yes, there has been some negligence in the old days, but I think we are trying our best to handle things, particularly for us, like the Kashmir issue, and how we have been able to now bring it back onto the,
Okay, regarding two elements, two key components of FATF, right? On one side, it is about financial, fraud like money laundering.
Money laundering.
Right. On the other side, it is terror financing. Sure. We have been struggling with the second part for quite some time, since 9/11 actually.
Right.
But regarding the first component, essentially for which FATF was created, to stop money laundering. And now we have actually amended the Anti-Terrorism Act, and we have actually deemed money laundering economic terrorism. That is all well and good. But do you think that this part of the broken system has been fixed or being fixed right now?
Well, this is exactly what we are doing, that we are passing all these laws for, is like money laundering by itself is as huge and as big of a crime as the terror financing is, because here, majority of those poor countries from where the money is being laundered by either their politicians or their bureaucrats or whoever, are basically taking advantage of those people around the globe. And that has to be stopped, and the money should be basically invested on the people where it belongs. And on the second side, then with the same use of, same source of money, if somebody's using it for terrorism, both are, I think, equally important, and both needs to be addressed very seriously, and that's what we are doing, and bringing and tabling the bills. And,
but laws, there were laws even before the these, the problem lies also in implementing them. How much you are able to reform the system is also crucial, right?
So for us, it's really a issue of life and death for Pakistan. I mean, we have to.
Let us not talk about
no
death. Let us hope that it is life and more life, right? Shakhawat Sahab, regarding the problem, and let us actually look at these two elements, the two quantities, anti-terrorism, actually terrorism financing and money laundering. We know that money laundering, hawala, hundi, and then benami accounts have been there for quite some time. Which one is bigger problem? Because in past 20 years, it seems that terrorism is the biggest problem, but our broken system, every time a government changes, all of a sudden, we have balance of payment crisis, we have current account deficit, and then we hear that certain model or certain launches took away money abroad. So all these problems, how much do they still need to be fixed?
What I believe is that two of them are very important, rather of vital importance, and there is a nexus between these two, the crime which emanates from the money laundering and the terror financing. You mentioned about the hawala and hundi, and finally when we see that this money which goes through these two channels, finally it goes both way to promote crimes and to fetch money for the procurement of the illegal arms,
right,
and terror financing also. So I think both have importance and nexus with each other. So far as the laws which were already there, which needed to be amended and to be transformed to the level of the standards which have been set by the FATF. So the Anti-Money Laundering Act 2010 was already promulgated, and that was also promulgated and made an act of parliament due to our international obligations and also of the FATF. Now some new standards have been set by the FATF, and we have been required to transform our laws and amend our laws in conformity with those standards and parameters. So this is, I believe, an advanced form of the law which is already existing.
Right.
And same is the case with the other bill which was tabled by the Treasury benches in the Senate. So what I believe is that we have to prove from our actions also, not only promulgating these laws or some bills or some ordinances or these sort of things, because actions speak louder than words.
And sir, when we are talking about actions, is it primarily lack of will on the part of the executive to actually implement in the past? That's what has led us to here, or is it also the problem of systemic weaknesses and lack of capacity?
Mr. Pitafi, you have been experienced, we have experienced, and we have visualized that before 9/11, 2001, there was an atmosphere in our country where the jihadi organizations were very openly performing, and even on the walls there were wall chalking that we are the best organization to give you the jihadi training. So after 9/11 there was a drift, and there was a totally somersault, and we were compelled to change our policies in respect of the financing and harboring or sponsoring the terrorism or terrorism organizations. So in the recent past we have experienced that certain steps have been taken by the state and the government. Few of the people who were declared as members of the terrorist organizations were declared and even arrested. And some of the organizations which were already in the proscribed list of the Anti-Terrorism Act 1997, they have been banned, and certain other steps are to be taken.
Right. So, but is it a capacity issue or intention issue?
I believe intention and capacity both. Because in the back of mind of certain elements in our society, they are still in favor of the jihad, not bad jihad, which is prescribed in the Holy Quran and ordained by the Sunnah.
Militancy,
yes,
right?
of course.
Yeah, and that is a big problem. We have to look at the narratives also.
And still, if we come across certain sections of our society,
right,
at the back of their mind, they are still in favor of that militancy and or something like this, which is contrary to the standards which have been set by FATF.
Okay.
So what I believe is that apart from bringing laws to curb these menaces, we must do something practically also, and we have to diminish that mindset which is already there.
And that mindset and that narrative are very important, and we are going to talk about that later in the program as well. Dutari Sahib, since we are talking about these important factors and these circumstances, right now I understand terrorism is a phenomena or discussion point that we have witnessed in recent years, but throughout my life one word has been constant in Pakistani narrative, and that is corruption. Money laundering, Benami accounts, all these problems are essentially part of a huge corruption pie. And we have been fighting corruption, but again the problem never goes away. Do you think that this element or this part of the problem can be fixed?
Well, I think that, to be very honest, corruption is a result of poor governance, right? I mean, let's be very clear. I am not one of those guys who actually preaches anti-corruption. I preach better governance.
Right.
And throughout my life, even my work during in Afghanistan post 9/11, if you look at it, I mean, I think in Pakistan, as Shah Khawar Sahib was saying, we have to look at it on two fronts. So you cannot separate the AML corruption, the anti-money laundering linked corruption, and the anti-terror financing linked corruption, because they are both feeding essentially the same beast.
Okay.
And where we need to understand, like, look at what happened today. So what happened today in the Senate is, number one, poor management by the Treasury in terms of preparation and being able to have consensus prior to any vote, etc.
Okay.
Second, inability to actually put personal attitudes and personal biases above and beyond a national cause.
Right.
And actually, for example, the Wasim incident that happened in the Senate should not have happened, as Shah Sahib said very rightly.
Right.
So that is one part. So now the question is, as you said, it's either intentions or is it really lack of capacity? I think that, to be very honest, let's start on corruption with the problem around not having the intent. Now, why don't we have the intent? What happened today in the Senate is a banding of the religious opposition as well as the political opposition. Because, to be very honest, currently the religious leaders of Pakistan are going to suffer because the pulpit is currently financed by both the ATF and the AML side.
Okay.
So when you look at proscribed organizations, whether you look at how an organization becomes proscribed, whether you look at through the NAP lens, the National Action Program lens, you basically have an alliance here, which I think that the PTI government has to recognize.
Okay.
That when it comes to such, whether it's ATF or this, they both lead to corruption, because, to be very honest, the jihadi organizations are no longer jihadi organizations. They are basically, at the root of them, they are corrupt ways and means, which they think are not corrupt because they don't believe in the existence of the state.
Okay.
So when you don't believe in the existence of the state and you believe that there's a higher God and a higher rule of law,
Right.
so you get into this. Last but not least, I think we also need to understand that even our own defense organizations, the legitimate defense organizations, sometimes, just like the CIA, just like everybody else, have to rely on a bit of money that moves without any knowledge.
Right.
And I think they need to fundamentally also curb what they do.
Right, but here's the interesting part. Whenever you talk about espionage, whenever you're talking about state actors which have to work on certain aspects in this manner, usually the test is never to get caught. And if today there is this problem that you even actually come to the national television and talk about it, perhaps we have to look at those standards as well. Now, the question that I was trying to understand is a country that is not debating its pensions, capacity of bureaucracy, how bureaucracy should be reformed. Do you think that the government or the state has the wherewithal to implement all these reforms, not only actually pass laws, but on grassroots level ensure that no malpractice takes place?
No, I think to be very honest, the intention, let's put it aside for a second. The fact that do we have the capacity today, the answer is yes, we have the capacity to enforce whatever we want, whenever we want. So the question then lies behind that question is, are we intending to do so? You see, remember, the government is the government, and I have seen the government in action throughout my 55 years, and when the government wants to enforce its writ, it enforces it. So it's really a question of, does the government really want to enforce its writ, whether it be vis-a-vis at the grassroots. I mean, I was in Oradze agency before Eid, and I was looking at what's happening. There are two mafias there. Both are basically linked to the AML and the ATF. One is the people who's growing the marijuana. The other is the pulpit, you know, the mosque at every second, mile. The network. The mosques are richer than the people. So something is going wrong here in the state, right? The presence of both the internal security organs as well as the external security organs is apparently appears to be in compliance with this, but they're not. Why they are not acting is because the state, and who do we define the state, is the government of the day.
Right.
So if the government of the day does not have the will to enforce it and is trying to count its vote bank, we are always going to be in this, and I don't think we are going to get out of the FET.
No, I'm going to take this question to the government side as well, treasury benches, but regarding what you're saying, since you're talking about ex parte, my concern essentially is that perhaps we are looking at the places where governance still is very weak, and once again it becomes a capacity issue. But in any case, Ibrahim Khan Sahab, since we are talking about capacity and intentions both, do you think that the government has the kind of intentions that are needed to implement what it is promising?
We are determined, and the issues we are facing is basically the national cause. And some of the political issues are that the political parties, the members of the political parties, majority of the opposition side, are basically serving the political and monetary interests of their lords. And that is basically the main issue where sometimes you say there is not a consensus between the parties on national interests of the national issue, national importance. So that
I'm intrigued that you actually bring up the issue of opposition parties, right? Because you essentially ran on the platform that you're going to bring about the kind of accountability that you have been vying for 24 years, right? Your party has been in power for 2 years, and you haven't been able to close any cases, with the exception of one that was actually whose cognizance was taken by Supreme Court of Pakistan, Mia Nawaz Sharif's case. Right. So if this is not an intention issue, then perhaps it is a capacity issue. In the end, it compromises all what we are saying.
It is definitely a capacity issue, and capacity is not only that we do not have enough manpower, but the manpower we got is not up to the mark and skilled enough to address the issue. And so we are struggling with that, and since the last, particularly the last 1 decade, the way things have deteriorated, on the subject of these government institutions, the way they were badly politicized. And as a consequence, now we are having a hard time with trying to get things done in time because of not the will of the implementing authorities, and again, and secondly, an impediment or trying to put a stop to this process by the opposition party.
But when earlier Dutari Sahab was saying that Pakistan should be lobbying to be a part of FATF, one word came to my mind, and that is proactivity, right? If you are proactive, if you are taking the bull by the horn, you can change a lot of things. If you are saying that we have skill problems, capacity issues, human capacity issues, what are we doing to actually enhance the human capital involved?
So far I think I have to admit that we have not been that successful in doing and achieving that goal because of a sheer reason that those people who are politicized are still in positions who you cannot legally
Evict?
evict.
Okay. Why so?
Okay, why so? Because then there are courts involved, and by the time those courts make decisions, I mean, you know, your story is over. I mean, already. So there is.
If you think that your executive side doesn't have the capacity and you don't have the kind of laws that can actually help you, you know,
I'm not saying that.
then first go to the court and ask them to sack those people.
This is what I'm saying. This is what I actually was. I was one of the very few parliamentarians who brought the subject up in front of the Prime Minister of Pakistan.
Right.
And told them that there's nothing wrong with the system.
Okay.
It's man behind the system which is rotten.
Okay.
And that needs replacement.
It's
until we
it's
get
not
that,
a very popular stance for a political party, is it?
No, it's not. But for the
man behind the system is rotten.
Okay.
Okay.
This is what I'm saying is because I have experienced this.
Right.
From a small to the top level, I mean, things are not working for the national interest, and people watch their personal interests first.
Right. Durrani Sahab also wants to come in, sir, very quickly.
Very quickly on this, I think I have to, you know, I mean, PTI, I voted for them, let's be very frank. And I'm a tad disappointed, but it's not too much. But, you know, when they say man behind the system, to be very honest, I think the system, PTI, PMLN, PVP, all inherited, is the same system, right?
Okay.
It's an extractive system that was set up by the colonial powers.
Right.
And essentially, in that system, if you're going to live within that system, the way the governance structure is set up are not conducive to any kind of reform.
Right.
How come an octogenarian in Malaysia is able to get an indictment against Najib on the one MBDP case in less than 7 months, while we have been flitting around over generations to commit and implicate just one wrongdoing of a politician?
That's a very good point.
So,
actually,
you know,
it brings me back to the book of Asimoglu and Robinson, right? While nations fail, an extractive institution. But the concern, once again, is that we were talking about reforming bureaucracy to make it more inclusive rather than extractive. And we haven't been able to bring in the local government so far.
If I may be very bold, and I thank the MNA for actually listening to the normal, average Pakistani citizen.
Right.
To be very honest, you know, I think PTI has failed because they never had a plan on how to achieve what they wanted to achieve.
Right.
They have relied on a few external partners, and they thought that these people could come and, I mean, to change Pakistan, you need people who know Pakistan.
Yeah.
Right? So I think that is a fundamental flaw in PTI, is that it's not about reforming bureaucracy. It's about how to use bureaucracy to achieve the ends that you want to achieve.
Yeah, but
I think the judge sitting next to me can tell you that.
That's true, but with due respect, the government, the way, usually the people exist on a local level and they keep on running the business, right? And that is one tier where you don't have government. You have provincial government, you have federal government, and on that level, a common man doesn't function. So that becomes a problem. But let me go back to Justice Saab. Justice Saab, we are talking about all these reforms. I mean, why is it that I haven't even seen a research work, arguing that how much change is needed in laws, in bureaucracy, in capacity, and in intentions to bring about this kind of qualitative change?
Mr. Pitafi, there is much space and available where the laws are to be changed and the rules of business are to be changed. But we still have certain documents which we can follow and we can be benefited out of it.
Okay.
I believe the basic document, which is a complete guideline, that is the Constitution of Pakistan 1973.
Right.
It is based upon the trichotomy of power. It has established four corners for all the institutions. That's how the parliament has to perform, how the executive has to govern, and how judiciary has to implement the laws.
Right.
And the same in respect of the civil servants, there is a complete chapter.
Yeah.
And above all, there are rules of businesses both in the federal government and the provincial governments. These rules have been derived from the basic concepts of the Constitution. So what I believe is that if we cannot go for these reforms, structural reforms, as we have mentioned, if we start following the constitution and the book, which is the rules of business, both in the federal government and the provincial governments, I believe we can bring about so many good things. But the problem is that whenever any political government comes, it comes with some manifesto which they have given to the people, the promises which they made to the people, and for implementation of the same, most of the governments, I believe, they mostly bank upon the civil bureaucracy. And they just altogether ignore their political will and political leadership and the political will and spirit.
That would explain why we haven't been able to reform the bureaucracy for that
What I believe is that there should be a balance. You must assign duties to the bureaucracy, which the rules of business assign them, but the political will you have to implement with your political leadership.
Yeah, but with due respect, I was not merely talking about the political intent, right? Here the concern was the civil society and intellectual intent. Why is it that we have lived through all this for 73 years as a nation? There have been ups and downs, and I don't even see, apart from the constitution, I get the point that you were making about the constitution and the laws and the trichotomy of power, but whenever there is a contentious issue, somehow those borders between the three powers that might be also dim. Regardless of that, the question right now is, why don't we even have a paradigm? Why is it that our civil society is not arguing this kind of change is needed? Why do we have to listen to FATF rather than our intellectual or brain trust that these things have to be actually brought to the book?
Well, this is, I believe, very detailed discussion and debate on all these issues, because there are certain things which we have to undertake, which the international obligations require from us. And there are certain things which we have to cater with the problems of the people which they are facing. But I believe